In this video I am talking about this Mitakon Speedmaster 50mm f0.95 lens from Zhongyi Optics, or otherwise known as this. If you can pronounce it, I can't. If you are here for the first time, my name is Pav, and on this channel I talk about all things photography and video, gear reviews, tutorials and more. If this is something that you are interested in, then please consider subscribing. This lens has caught my eye, mainly because it is a very good looking copy of a famous and very expensive Leica M 50mm f0.95 lens. And even though this is not a cheap lens, it is 15 times cheaper than the Leica lens. Yes, 15 times. Leica lens is for very wealthy and very lucky people who can spend this kind of money on a lens. And looking at the sample shot with the Leica lens on Flickr, it is also an incredible performer. So how does this compare? Before I go into it, I must mention that this is a leica-m mount lens that can be adapted with manual adapters to pretty much any camera, but also it can be used on the Nikon Z and Sony E with autofocus motorized adapters. I have been testing it fully manual as it was meant to be used, as well as with this Megadap autofocus adapter on Nikon Z camera. I usually go straight into lenses performance in my reviews to show you what image quality looks like before talking about the technical specs and build quality. But because the performance this lens delivers is so peculiar, I am going to talk about the impressive factors here first. When you receive it and unpack it, it comes in this non-descriptive matte paper sleeve, but as soon as you pull that paper sleeve off, you'll be surprised to see that the lens actually is in this beautiful leather box. I think it is leather. It looks and smells a bit like leather, but I could be wrong. It is very hard to tell. Leather-like, anyway, very nice. The lens itself is very good looking, just like the Leica one, and it feels absolutely rock solid, heavy, weighing 670 grams, very smooth focus ring, clickless aperture ring and 67mm filter thread size. It has got 9 aperture blades with round diaphragm for extra smooth bokeh. It has got that built-in pull-out, pull-in lens hood, which is very hard to manage, and overall feel of a very high-end vintage lens. The supplied instructions are all in Chinese only, but looking at the pictures, I presume that this little metal key is for calibrating lens and getting rid of front or back focusing if the lens doesn't focus where you would expect it to. You can buy it in black like this one or silver finish just like the original Leica M. The whole thing screams quality, and since I have opened the box and held it in my hand, I couldn't wait to shoot with it. I had extremely high expectations. As I mentioned before, it is not a cheap lens. It costs $799 US, and price-wise it is certainly way above the cheap phone and novelty lenses from 7 Artisans or apparel. So how does it do? Well, I'm not a stranger to manual lenses and manual focusing. I use fully manual lenses on a regular basis, but this is not easy to use, mainly because optically it is very imperfect. Its main selling point of being Speedmaster with crazy wide aperture of f0.95 is unfortunately nothing more than a gimmick. There's just no easy way anyway, to get sharp photos this wide open. Not even because your depth of field is super shallow, but also because this lens delivers very, very soft edges even when you are shooting a static object and nail that focus point bang on. The contrast and color are weak, and there is just crazy amount of uncontrollable flaring, making it almost unusable, or at least very hard to use wide open. It even flares when there are bright objects or walls in the shots, not just when pointing it at the sun or bright light sources. There's also quite a bit of vignetting and some distortion too. It all gets marginally better when you shoot at f2, f2.8 and f4, but if you are going to shoot anything at f4, why would you buy a lens with this wide aperture in the first place? A lot of people talk about ultra wide aperture lenses as a solution for shooting in low light conditions, but opening aperture wide, especially as wide as f0.95, won't make it any easier to obtain better or sharper images. Not with this. the lens produces crazy amount of chromatic aberration at the wider apertures. Not always possible to be fixed in post, sometimes maybe, but most of the time the fringing is so strong that it might be difficult to remove. Also, there is this very swirly background blur in the bokeh, kind of in a good way. I kind of like it. Reminds me of the imperfect and cheap Soviet Helios lenses. Yeah, this kind of a blur, swirly blur, which adds the character to images and videos taken with this lens. I am a strong believer that whatever lens you have or can afford, you can make it work for you. You learn its faults and work around them. This is a different kind of beast. It's a first lens in my life that I have actually had to fight constantly to get results I wanted. For a super shallow depth of field, I would set it to f2 just to be on a safe side. Still not great, but maybe 1 in 5, maybe 6 photos would be usable. Pretty good at f4 and really sharp at f8, but for the price this lens costs, this should be better at wider apertures. This lens really redeems itself and comes to life when shooting video with it. Wide open, the softness the optics deliver is much more forgiving in video than in photography. Certainly decent choice to get that very elusive cinematic look straight out of the camera. Yes, at f0.95 it is still hard to nail that focus, but because of the depth of field being so shallow, focus peaking really is pronounced well, making it easier to dial that sweet focus points well. Manual focus ring travel is quite long though, making it a little hard to get smooth long focus pulls, as you do have to turn it a few times to get from one end to the other. But overall filming with it is enjoyable experience, delivering great cinematic results easily. Conclusion: in my opinion, this is the one of, if not the hardest lens to use I have ever tried. There's a lot of cheaper vintage options that can do better overall than this and be more fun to use. It looks great for sure, and it can deliver good results if you stick with it. But if you want a premium quality and experience when shooting photos, this might not be a lens for you. It looks like Leica Noctilux, but even though I never actually tried Noctilux lens, I am very sure that this is not the same lens optically. I definitely recommend it if it was cheaper, much cheaper, but for $799, I'd expect to see better results overall. Also for the price, depending on your camera system, of course, there's a lot of 50mm autofocusing options available. Maybe not f0.95, but certainly f1.4 or f1.8, which in real world are more usable and more versatile than this. If you are a Leica user and want a lens that looks and feels like the Noctilux 50mm, then this might seem like the only affordable option before you have to remortgage your house to buy the real deal. But if you buy this, don't expect Leica results from it. And this is it from me. If you like this video, then please give me the thumbs up. If you like this kind of content, cameras, lenses, photography, video tutorials, then please consider subscribing. Support the channel, check out my t-shirt merch store, buy me a coffee, or simply comment below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. 1 in 5, maybe 6 photos would be usable. Manual focus ring travel is quite long. If you are a Leica user and want a lens that looks and feels like the Noctilux 50 in and out, and overall